Struggling single mom buys formula with quarters. The word struck like a slap. Mary Mitchell blinked at the cashier, then looked down at the mound of coins she'd carefully lined up on the counter. Quarters, dimes, nickels, even 2 pennies she'd scraped from the bottom of her coat pocket. Everything she had left. Her arms tightened around 6-month-old Janice, whose head rested against her shoulder, warm and damp with sweat. The baby coughed again, sharp, congested, pitiful, and let out a soft whimper. Her cheeks were red and blotchy from the fever. The formula Mary had chosen wasn't just any brand. It was Gentle Care Premium, the one Janice's pediatrician had recommended for her sensitive digestion. Mary knew it cost more than the regular kind, but after 3 nights of projectile vomiting, diaper rash, and nonstop crying, there was no alternative. She had made up her mind before they even left their apartment. She would buy it no matter what. God, she hadn't expected to come up short. "You're short, honey. $3.18 in." Mary's hands, raw from wind and cold, slowly reached toward the can on the counter. Her throat was tight. She couldn't even summon an apology. Behind her, someone coughed impatiently. The line had grown. A man shifted his weight. A teenage girl popped gum. The warmth of the store was stifling now, too quiet, too watchful. Janice whimpered again, and Mary gently rocked her in her arms, whispering softly, "Shh, baby girl." The cashier, a round-faced woman with silver-rimmed glasses and a red knit sweater, offered a hesitant smile. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Prices went up last month. It's 24.16s with tax." Mary's voice barely made it past her lips. I thought I had enough." "You were close." The woman's tone was kind, not mocking. "Just over $3 short." Mary stared at the can for a long moment. Her pride wanted to walk away. Her daughter's breathing, shallow and rattling, anchored her in place. She had planned to skip lunch today, maybe dinner too. That was fine. She had gone hungry before, but Janice couldn't wait. With her free hand, Mary reached out slowly and began to pull the can back from the scanner. Then a quiet shuffle of footsteps, a presence beside her. A man stepped forward from the line. He didn't speak at first, just reached into the inner pocket of a charcoal wool coat and retrieved a thin black credit card. His movements were calm, almost detached, as though this were not a moment of decision, but a matter of routine. He placed the card gently on the counter and said, "Put it on my card." The cashier froze for half a second, looking from the sleek black card on the counter to the man who had spoken. His presence was quiet, not commanding, but somehow it hushed the room. Joseph Westridge was tall, sharply dressed in a tailored charcoal coat, dark trousers, and polished shoes that seemed too expensive for the sticky linoleum floor beneath them. His salt and pepper hair was swept back neatly, and there was a stillness to him. Not stiff, but composed, like someone used to being listened to. He didn't look at the other customers. He didn't explain himself, just "Put it on my card." Mary blinked, startled. The weight of her daughter in her arms had numbed her to everything but survival. Now, for a moment, the room tilted. She adjusted Janice, who squirmed softly, and took a small step back. "I don't want your pity," she said, voice low, more defensive than she'd intended. Joseph met her eyes. His expression didn't change. "It's not pity, it's just kindness, and you look like you could use some today." Something about the way he said it, gently without judgment, landed heavier than a dozen reassurances might have. Behind the counter, Betty, the cashier, let out a tiny breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She'd seen all kinds walk through the store. Angry men in suits, mothers breaking down in the candy aisle, teenagers trying to steal energy drinks. But this was different, and she cleared her throat. "That'll be 24.16, she murmured. Joseph handed her the card, barely glancing at the screen as it beeped, approved, and spat out the receipt. He picked up the small white bag and turned toward Mary, extending it with calm finality. Mary hesitated. Her fingers tightened around Janice's tiny body. She was still burning up, still sniffling. Mary's shoulders sagged with exhaustion. Her pride screamed at her to refuse. But Janice whimpered again, and that was louder. Mary took the bag, eyes lowered. "Thank you," she said, barely above a whisper. Joseph didn't smile. He simply nodded once. Then he reached into his coat pocket again, rummaging briefly before pulling out a small, well-worn plush keychain a tan teddy bear, faded and frayed around the ears. He knelt slightly, balancing his weight so he could speak softly at Janice's level. The baby blinked at him, cheeks flushed, breath wheezy. "This helped my niece once," he said, holding the bear out. "She had night terrors after her mom passed. I carried this in my pocket for weeks until she finally stopped crying at night. Maybe it'll help her too." Mary stared at the bear. For a long moment, she didn't move. Her throat ached. Then she reached out, her fingers brushing against his as she took it. She said nothing. Janice's small hand latched onto the soft bear almost immediately, pressing it to her cheek. Behind the counter, Betty sniffed discreetly, then cleared her throat louder than necessary. She straightened a row of gum packets. "That was a kind thing you did," she said softly. Joseph rose back to his full height and gave her a respectful nod. Sometimes the world's too loud. Quiet kindness can go a long way. Mary turned then, her boots scuffing softly against the floor, and headed for the door. She didn't look back, didn't say another word. The bell chimed overhead as she pushed through into the cold evening air. And just like that, she was gone, disappearing into the dark like so many women before her. Joseph stood still for a beat. The line behind him had begun to shift again. Life resumed. A man stepped forward with a case of beer. Someone in the back muttered about the delay, but Betty watched Joseph as he tucked the receipt into his wallet, nodded politely once more, and turned for the door. He stepped out into the sharp wind. The sun had fully dipped below the Boston skyline, and the streetlights glowed orange against the falling snow. His car was parked a block away, a sleek black sedan gleaming beneath a flickering lamppost. But Joseph didn't go straight to it. Instead, he stood there, coat collar pulled up, watching the direction Mary had taken. She was barely a silhouette now, one arm wrapped tightly around her baby, the other gripping the small plastic bag. She was walking fast, not out of fear, but because she had no choice. A mother's urgency. Joseph exhaled slowly, his breath misted in the air. Something in his gut stirred. That woman. She didn't ask for help. She had probably gotten used to not asking. And yet, here she was doing everything she could for that baby. He glanced back at the corner store, then once more down the street. He couldn't shake it. That tug, that instinct. He started walking toward his car, but his steps slowed. And when he reached the door, hand poised over the handle, he paused. He looked back again. The city buzzed behind him, horns in the distance, someone yelling, but all he saw was her. And something told him this wasn't the end of it. The rain came without warning. It started as a mist, barely noticeable against the night air. But within minutes, it thickened into a steady downpour, soaking the cracked sidewalks of downtown Boston. Mary hunched her shoulders, pulling the thin hood of her worn coat over Janice's head. The baby whimpered, coughing harder now, her little breaths rasping with effort. Mary wrapped the coat tighter around them both, shielding Janice as best she could, though the fabric was already damp. She kept walking fast but careful. The sidewalk glistened under the streetlights, slick with puddles and oil. Each step felt heavier than the last, her arms aching from holding Janice close. The baby squirmed against her chest, restless, feverish. Then she heard it, the hum of a car engine slowing down behind her. A sleek black sedan pulled up along the curb beside her. The passenger side window eased down, and through the mist and glow of headlights, Mary saw the same man from the store, Joseph Westridge. He didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice. His tone was even, direct. "You shouldn't be out here with a sick baby," he said. "Let me drive you to the hospital." Mary froze, the rain dripping from her eyelashes. Janice coughed again sharply, her tiny fist clenching in Mary's coat. She looked at the calm, then at the baby, then back at the man behind the wheel. "Why we do?" she asked, not accusing, just exhausted. Joseph rested both hands on the steering wheel. "Because she needs help, and because I don't want to regret not offering." Mary's jaw tightened, but the next cough from Janice made her decision for her. She nodded once. The door clicked open and she slid into the front seat, still clutching Janice. The interior was warm, the scent of leather and faint cologne mixing with the smell of rain and baby powder. Joseph didn't say anything for the first few blocks. He drove smoothly, eyes focused on the road, windshield wipers sweeping rhythmically. Finally, he asked, "What's your name?" "Mary Mitchell," she replied, brushing damp strands of hair from her face. His head turned slightly, surprise flickering across his expression. You used to work at Westridge. Mary looked over at him, startled. You remember? I do, he said. You were nominated for the Elevate program 2 years ago. Then one day you were just gone. Mary let out a soft, dry laugh. Yeah, that sounds about right. Joseph waited. My husband left when I was 6 months pregnant, she continued quietly. He said he wasn't ready to be a father. I tried to keep working, but things spiraled fast. I didn't know how to show up in a boardroom when I couldn't even afford childcare or rent. The car slowed at a red light. Rain pattered against the roof. I didn't mean to disappear, she added, eyes on the blurred city through the window. I just didn't know how to stay. Joseph didn't respond. He simply nodded, the kind of nod that said, I hear you, not, I feel sorry for you. You were very good, he said finally. Everyone noticed. As they drove on, the silence settled gently between them, not awkward, but respectful. In the rearview mirror, Joseph stole a glance. He saw Mary rocking Janice gently in her arms, murmuring something soft, a lullaby maybe. One hand cradled the baby's head, the other wiped at her own cheek. Tears mixed with rain had begun to fall, but she didn't let herself break. Not fully. She sang through it. Joseph's fingers gripped the wheel tighter. He didn't know what he was doing exactly, but he knew one thing, as the hospital sign came into view through the mist. He was glad he had turned the car around. The emergency room was quiet in the early evening lull, filled only with the occasional beep of machines and the low murmur of nurses moving through the halls. Mary sat stiffly in the corner of the pediatric wing, Janice cradled in her arms, bundled in a warm hospital blanket. The doctor had just stepped out after explaining the diagnosis. Mild pneumonia, likely brought on by the cold and prolonged exposure. Janice would need monitoring for a few hours, a prescription for antibiotics, and rest. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough to make Mary's heart ache with guilt and fear. Mary stared down at her daughter, gently brushing the damp wisps of hair from her flushed forehead. The baby had finally stopped coughing and fallen into a restless sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling in short, shallow breaths. She hadn't noticed Joseph was still there until she looked up. He sat on the bench opposite her, arms resting on his knees, tie slightly loosened. His gaze wasn't on his phone or the clock or even on her. It was on Janice. Quiet, patient. You didn't have to stay, Mary said softly. Joseph turned his head, offering a small shrug. I know. Mary hesitated. She wanted to ask why, but the exhaustion pulled too hard on her voice. Her body, drained of every reserve, slowly gave in. Her eyes closed. Still holding Janice close, she let her head fall back against the wall, and sleep overtook her. When she awoke, the lights were dimmer, and the world felt quieter. Janice was still in her arms, breathing steadily now. There was a thin blanket over Mary's legs that hadn't been there before. She sat up slowly, her joints stiff. Something crinkled in her pocket. Frowning, she reached in and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A hospital payment receipt. Fully paid. Her throat tightened. She looked around. Joseph was sitting just outside the room now, sipping a cup of hospital coffee. When he saw her stir, he stood and stepped inside, careful not to startle her. You paid? Mary asked quietly, holding up the receipt. He nodded once. It wasn't much. I figured you had enough on your plate. She opened her mouth to protest but couldn't find the words. Joseph ran a hand over the back of his neck. I didn't do it to offend you, Mary. I've been here before. Not in your shoes exactly, but close enough to remember what it feels like. Mary studied him, brows drawn in cautious curiosity. My sister, he continued, voice low. She was a single mom, 2 jobs, no support. I kept saying I'd help her more. Visit, send money, call, but work always came first. I was too late. He looked away for a moment, as if the memory still lived somewhere too raw. She passed away 5 years ago. Pneumonia. She ignored it until it was too far gone. Her daughter was 4. Mary's breath caught. She lowered her eyes to Janice. I made a lot of excuses back then, Joseph added, about being busy, about life getting in the way. I think today I just didn't want to make another one. Silence hung between them, soft and heavy, the kind of silence that made room for honesty. Mary's defenses, slowly eroded by exhaustion and truth, gave way. She looked up at him, really looked, and for the first time that day, her face softened. "I'm sorry about your sister," she said quietly. Joseph offered a small nod. "Thank you." A pause. Then gently he surrounded closer, lowering himself to her level. He reached out, not boldly, just enough to rest a hand lightly on her shoulder, barely there, almost asking for permission. Mary didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let the weight of it settle, warm and grounding. She exhaled slowly, closing her eyes again for a brief moment. And when she opened them, she whispered, "Thank you for staying." Joseph's voice was almost a murmur. "Of course." And in that quiet room, under the hum of fluorescent lights and the steady breath of a sleeping child, a woman who had forgotten what safety felt like sat beside a man who had once failed someone and refused to do it again. It wasn't a beginning, not yet, but it was no longer just survival. It was something more. 3 days later, in a modest apartment building on the edge of Dorchester, Mary stood at the window watching the snowfall. The radiator clanked and hissed, fighting against the February chill that crept through the single-pane windows. She held a cup of instant coffee between her palms, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. In the makeshift crib nearby, really just a converted drawer with blankets, Janice slept peacefully. The antibiotics were working. Her fever had broken yesterday, and the harsh, rattling cough had softened. On the nightstand beside the crib sat the small teddy bear keychain, watching over the baby like a tiny guardian. Mary's phone buzzed softly. She glanced at it, surprised to see a text from a number she'd only saved 3 days ago. "Just checking in. How's she doing?" Mary hesitated, thumbs hovering over the screen. Joseph Westridge had given her his number at the hospital, but she hadn't expected him to use it. What was protocol here? What was the polite amount of gratitude to express to a stranger who had suddenly appeared in your worst moment, helped without being asked, and then disappeared again? "Much better," she typed. "The medicine is working. Thank you again for everything." She pressed send before she could overthink it. The reply came faster than expected. "Good to hear. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask." Mary set the phone down and returned to the window. The snow was falling harder now, the kind of snow that meant school closings and delayed commutes. Not that it mattered to her. She had nowhere to be. The temp agency had stopped calling months ago. Her resume, once impressive, now had a gap that seemed to grow wider with each passing day. She closed her eyes, leaning her forehead against the cool glass. How had her life come to this? 2 years ago, she'd been on track for promotion at one of Boston's most prestigious corporations. She'd had colleagues, a husband, a future that stretched out bright and clear. Now she had an empty bank account, a sick baby, and rent coming due in 10 days with no way to pay it. Behind her, Janice stirred, making the soft, mewling noises that signaled she was waking up. Mary pushed away from the window and moved to the crib, lifting her daughter gently. The baby's eyes fluttered open, no longer glassy with fever. She made a small sound of recognition, her tiny hand reaching up to touch Mary's cheek. "Hey there, sweet girl," Mary whispered, pressing her lips to Janice's forehead. "Feeling better today?" In response, Janice gurgled and kicked her legs, a good sign. Mary carried her to the changing table, an old dresser topped with a padded mat. As she changed the diaper, her mind wandered back to Joseph. What kind of man stops for a stranger in a convenience store? What kind of CEO remembers a mid-level employee who disappeared 2 years ago? She thought about his sister, the one who died, leaving behind a daughter. Perhaps that explained it. Guilt was a powerful motivator. Mary knew that better than most. How many nights had she lain awake, guilt crushing her chest as she wondered if leaving Boston, leaving her job, might have been the wrong choice. Maybe if she'd fought harder, asked for help, but there was no one to ask. Her parents were gone. Her friends had slowly drifted away during her pregnancy when she couldn't join them for drinks or weekend trips. And James had made his choice clear. The day she told him about the pregnancy, something had changed in his eyes. A subtle shift, like a door closing. 2 months later, he was gone, leaving only a note on the kitchen counter. "I'm not ready for this. I'm sorry." 3 sentences that had collapsed her world. Mary finished changing Janice and lifted her again, settling the baby against her shoulder. Her phone buzzed once more. She picked it up, expecting another text from Joseph, but instead found an automated reminder from her bank. Insufficient funds fee, 35. Her stomach tightened. That would leave her with exactly $27.42 until the end of the month. Not enough for rent. Not even close. She set the phone down again and carried Janice to the kitchen. The formula from the store would last another 3 days, maybe 4 if she was careful. After that, she didn't want to think after that. Mary filled the kettle and set it on the stove to boil. The apartment was silent except for the gentle sounds of Janice and the occasional creak of the old building settling. This quiet was both a comfort and a curse. No one demanding anything from her, but also no one to share the burden with, just her and Janice against the world. As she prepared the formula, Mary found herself thinking about Westridge Industries again. She'd been so proud to work there. The company had a reputation for innovation in urban development and community investment. Her role in the public outreach division had been challenging but fulfilling. She'd been developing a new initiative for affordable housing when she discovered she was pregnant. The irony wasn't lost on her now, as she stood in an apartment she could no longer afford. The kettle whistled, startling Janice, who began to fuss. Mary bounced her gently while testing the temperature of the formula on her wrist. Just right. She moved to the single armchair in the corner of the room, a second-hand find from a neighbor moving out, and settled in to feed her daughter. As Janice drank hungrily, Mary's mind continued to drift. Joseph had recognized her immediately, had spoken her name with recognition. She hadn't realized anyone at Westridge would remember her at all, let alone the CEO. She'd never even met him directly during her time there, just seen him from a distance at company gatherings. Mary's phone buzzed again, but she ignored it this time. Probably just another overdraft notice. Instead, she focused on Janice, on the miracle of this tiny human who depended on her completely. Whatever happened, she would find a way to make things work. She had to. When Janice finished eating, Mary burped her and then held her close, humming softly. Despite everything, the financial stress, the isolation, the uncertainty, moments like these made it all worthwhile. The weight of her daughter in her arms, trusting and content, was enough to keep her going. One day at a time. That had become her mantra. Eventually, Janice dozed off again. Mary carefully laid her back in the makeshift crib, tucking the blankets around her. The teddy bear keychain sat watching, its worn fabric a testament to years of being held and needed. Mary touched it gently. What had Joseph said? That it had helped his niece after her mother died. A talisman against grief, passed from one child to another. Mary returned to the window. The snow was still falling, transforming the gritty urban landscape into something softer, cleaner. For a moment, the world looked peaceful, as if all its sharp edges had been smoothed away. But Mary knew better. Under that pristine blanket of white, nothing had changed. The cracks were still there, just hidden for a while. She finally checked her phone again. 3 notifications. 2 were indeed from the bank, but the third was another text from Joseph. Would you consider meeting for coffee tomorrow? I have a proposition that might interest you. Professional, not personal. Mary stared at the message, reading it twice, 3 times. A proposition? Professional? What could he possibly have in mind? Her first instinct was to refuse. Pride, that stubborn companion of the struggling, reared its head. She didn't want to be a charity case, didn't want to be helped out of pity. But then she looked at Janice sleeping peacefully, unaware of their precarious situation. And she looked at her bank balance, and the calendar, with rent due in 10 days. Pride wouldn't keep a roof over their heads or food in Janice's bottle. Where and when? She typed back. The response came immediately. Tomorrow, 11 a.m., Bailey's Cafe on Commonwealth Avenue. I'll be in the back booth. Mary sent a simple, I'll be there, and set the phone down again. Whatever this proposition was, it couldn't make things worse than they already were. And maybe, just maybe, it might make things better. The next morning dawned clear and cold. The snow had stopped sometime in the night, leaving behind a crystalline world that sparkled under a brilliant blue sky. Mary dressed carefully in the nicest outfit she still owned, black slacks, a cream sweater, and a tailored blazer that now hung a bit loose on her frame. She applied a touch of makeup, just enough to hide the shadows under her eyes, and pulled her brown hair back into a neat ponytail. Mrs. Rodriguez from the apartment next door had agreed to watch Janice for a few hours. The older woman had a soft spot for the baby and often helped out when she could, refusing any payment beyond the occasional home-cooked meal that Mary would drop off when she had enough to share. "You look nice," Mrs. Rodriguez said as Mary handed over Janice in the diaper bag. "Job interview?" "Something like that," Mary replied, not wanting to explain. "I shouldn't be more than 2 hours. She just ate, so she'll probably sleep most of the time." Mrs. Rodriguez waved away her concerns. "We'll be fine. You go. Do what you need to do." The walk to the tea station was brisk and invigorating. Mary had forgotten how it felt to move without a baby in her arms, to walk with purpose towards something other than a grocery store or pharmacy. The train was crowded with late-morning commuters, but she found a seat and spent the ride trying not to overthink the upcoming meeting. What could Joseph Westridge possibly want with her? She'd been a mid-level employee at best, nowhere near the executive circle, and she'd left without giving proper notice. Hardly the kind of former staff member a CEO would seek out. Bailey's Cafe was an elegant but unpretentious establishment, known for its excellent coffee and discreet atmosphere. It was the kind of place where business deals were discussed in hushed tones over cappuccinos and scones. Mary hesitated outside, taking a deep breath before pushing open the door. The warmth and aroma of fresh coffee enveloped her immediately. The cafe was busy but not crowded, with a gentle hum of conversation underlying soft classical music. Mary scanned the room and spotted Joseph in the back, just as he'd said. He was dressed in a charcoal suit, reading something on a tablet, a cup of coffee at his elbow. He looked up as she approached, setting the tablet aside and standing briefly to greet her. "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Mary sat opposite him, her back straight, hands folded on the table. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Westridge." "Joseph, please," he said, signaling to a nearby server, who promptly appeared at their table. "What can I get for you?" the server asked Mary. She hesitated, mindful of her empty bank account. "Just a black coffee, please." "And a selection of pastries," Joseph added smoothly. "The almond croissants here are excellent." When the server had gone, Joseph turned his full attention to Mary. His gaze was direct but not intimidating, assessing but not judgmental. "How's your daughter today?" "Much better, thank you," Mary replied. "The antibiotics are working well." Joseph nodded. "I'm glad to hear it." He paused as the server returned with Mary's coffee and a plate of assorted pastries. Once they were alone again, he continued. "I'll be direct, Ms. Mitchell. I've been reviewing some of our past projects at Westridge, particularly in the community outreach division where you worked." Mary took a sip of her coffee, grateful for something to do with her hands. "Oh?" "Yes, specifically the urban renewal initiative you were developing before you left. It was quite innovative, combining affordable housing with community gardens, workspace incubators, and childcare facilities. A holistic approach to urban revitalization." Mary blinked, surprised he knew the details. "That was just a proposal. I never got to implement it." "No, but someone else did," Joseph said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Or at least they tried to. It's been languishing for the past year, never quite achieving what was outlined in your original proposal." He slid the tablet across the table. On the screen was a presentation titled Urban Renewal Initiative, Phase 2 Implementation. At the bottom of the slide was a name, James Barrett. Mary's stomach dropped. James, her ex-husband, the father who had walked away from his unborn child without a backward glance. "I don't understand," she said, her voice tight. Joseph took a breath. "After you left, James Barrett was promoted to Senior Project Manager in Community Outreach. He presented your Urban Renewal Initiative as his own work and has been heading the implementation team ever since." Mary stared at the screen, a strange numbness spreading through her chest. He took my work?" "It appears so," Joseph said quietly. "And that's not all." He swiped to another slide showing a press release. "Westridge Industries welcomes James Barrett to executive team." The date was just 3 weeks ago. "He's been fast-tracked for an executive position," Joseph explained, "based largely on the supposed success of his community initiatives. And he's recently become engaged to Catherine Montrose, daughter of one of our major investors." Mary set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. James had stolen her work, claimed it as his own, and used it to advance his career while she struggled to feed their child. The injustice of it burned in her throat. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally. Joseph sat back, his expression carefully neutral. "Because it's wrong, and because I think you might be the only person who can help me correct it." "How?" "I need someone who knows the original vision of the Urban Renewal Initiative. Someone who can identify what elements have been altered or neglected in the current implementation. Someone who can prove the true authorship of the project." Joseph leaned forward slightly. "I need you, Ms. Mitchell." Mary's mind raced. "You want me to expose him?" "I want to right a wrong," Joseph corrected, "and in the process perhaps offer you an opportunity to reclaim what's yours." The server returned to refill their coffee cups. Mary used the interruption to collect her thoughts. Part of her wanted nothing more than to see James face consequences for his actions. But another part, the practical, survivalist part, wondered what this would mean for her and Janice. "What exactly are you proposing?" as she asked when they were alone again. "A 3-month consulting position," Joseph replied, "to evaluate the current state of the Urban Renewal Initiative and make recommendations for improvement. The position comes with flexible hours, a competitive salary, and access to our on-site childcare facility for your daughter." Mary's heart skipped. On-site childcare, a salary, the chance to work on her project again. It sounded too good to be true. "And after the 3 months," Joseph held her gaze steadily, "that would depend on the quality of your work and the recommendations of your supervisors. But I believe in second chances, Miss Mitchell, for both people and projects." Mary reached for an almond croissant, buying herself time to think. The pastry was flaky and buttery, dissolving on her tongue. How long had it been since she'd tasted something so exquisite? How long since she'd allowed herself any small luxury? "You realize this will be complicated," she said finally. "James won't simply admit he stole my work." "No, he won't," Joseph agreed. "But I believe in due process. You'll document your findings, present your evidence to the board, and let them make the determination." Mary considered this. "And what about James' fiancée, the investor's daughter? Won't this create problems with the Montrose family?" A small smile touched Joseph's lips. "Catherine Montrose is many things, Miss Mitchell, but a fool isn't one of them. If James has been dishonest about this, I suspect she'd rather know sooner than later." Mary stared into her coffee cup, watching the dark liquid swirl. This was a chance, perhaps her only chance, to get back on her feet, to provide for Janice, to reclaim a piece of herself that had been lost. But it would mean facing James again, confronting the man who had abandoned them both. It would mean stepping back into a world she'd fled in shame and desperation. "I don't have professional clothes anymore," she said, the admission painful. "I sold most of them, and I'd need time to arrange more permanent childcare for Janice. Mrs. Rodriguez can't watch her every day." "The childcare center can take her starting immediately," Joseph said. "And as for clothes, consider a wardrobe allowance part of your signing bonus. We want you to succeed, Ms. Mitchell." Mary looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of pity or condescension. She found none, just a steady, honest gaze that met hers without flinching. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "Really?" Joseph was quiet for a moment. "I told you about my sister," he finally said. "After she died, I took in my niece. She's in college now, doing well. But I've never forgotten how close she came to having no one. How one person stepping in at the right moment changed everything for her." He paused. "I'm not offering you charity, Miss Mitchell. I'm offering you the opportunity you've earned, the recognition you deserve. The rest is up to you." Mary took a deep breath. The practical concerns, rent, food, Janice's future, weighed heavily. But beneath them was something else, something she'd almost forgotten. Pride in her work, confidence in her abilities, the satisfaction of creating something meaningful. "When would you want me to start?" she asked. "Is Monday too soon?" Mary thought about her nearly empty bank account, the looming rent deadline, the dwindling supply of formula. "No," she said firmly. "Monday isn't too soon." Joseph's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes lightened. "Then we have a deal." He extended his hand across the table. Mary hesitated only briefly before shaking it. His grip was firm, confident, reassuring. Welcome back to Westridge Industries, Ms. Mitchell. Later that afternoon in his expansive office overlooking the Boston skyline, Joseph Westridge sat reviewing the paperwork for Mary's new position. Everything was in order: the temporary contract, the child care authorization, the signing bonus that would hit her account by end of day. He had instructed HR to expedite the process, citing project urgency. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Rebecca Chen, his chief of staff, entered with a tablet in hand. "I've processed the paperwork for Ms. Mitchell as requested," she said, her tone professional but curious. "May I ask what prompted this unusual hiring decision? The board might have questions." Joseph set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. Rebecca had been with him for 7 years. She deserved an honest answer. "Do you remember the Urban Renewal Initiative? The one James Barrett has been implementing?" Rebecca nodded. "Of course, it's one of our flagship community projects. The Montrose family is particularly invested in its success." "It wasn't his idea," Joseph said simply. "He took credit for another employee's work after she left the company. I'm bringing her back to set the record straight." Rebecca's eyes widened slightly. "That's a significant accusation. Do you have proof?" "Not yet, but I intend to get it." Joseph turned to look out at the city spread below them. Somewhere out there was Mary Mitchell, perhaps telling her daughter that things were about to change for the better. "We pride ourselves on integrity at Westridge. It's time we lived up to that claim." Rebecca studied him for a moment. "This could get messy, Joseph, especially with the Montrose connection." "I'm aware. And you're sure this is about integrity? Not about—" She hesitated. Joseph turned back to face her, one eyebrow raised. "Not about what?" Rebecca chose her words carefully. "You've seemed different since you met Ms. Mitchell. More invested." "I helped a woman in trouble," Joseph said evenly, "and in doing so discovered a wrong that needs righting. That's all this is." Rebecca didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded. "I'll support whatever you decide, as always. Just be careful. Corporate politics can be treacherous, especially when family investments are involved." "Noted," Joseph replied with a small smile. "Thank you, Rebecca." When she had gone, Joseph returned to the window. The February sun was setting early, casting long shadows across the city. He thought about Mary Mitchell, about the determination in her eyes even as she counted out quarters for baby formula, about the gentle way she had held her daughter, protecting her from the world with nothing but her own body and will. And he thought about his sister, Andrea, who had fought just as hard, who had been just as determined, who had died anyway, leaving her daughter behind. Joseph had made a promise at Andrea's grave, that he would never again be too busy to see someone struggling, that he would never again put profit above people, that he would use his position to make a difference when he could. Today, he had kept that promise. Whatever happened next, with Mary, with James, with the Montrose family, he would face it knowing he had done the right thing. And for now, that was enough. In her small apartment, Mary sat on the floor beside Janice, who was batting happily at a colorful toy suspended above her. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, warming the room despite the chill outside. Mary's phone dinged with a notification, a deposit alert from her bank. The signing bonus, enough to cover rent for 3 months and still have plenty left over. Mary's hand trembled slightly as she set the phone down. After so many months of scrimping and stretching and going without, the sudden influx of funds felt almost unreal. "Things are going to be different now, Janice," she whispered, stroking her daughter's soft hair. "We're going to be okay." Janice gurgled and kicked her legs, oblivious to the significance of the moment. But Mary felt it deep in her bones, the shifting of a tide, the opening of a door long thought closed. Monday would bring challenges, no doubt. Facing former colleagues who had watched her leave in shame, confronting the evidence of James' betrayal, proving herself all over again. But for the first time in months, Mary felt a flicker of something she had almost forgotten. Hope, not just for survival, but for something more. A chance to reclaim her work, her pride, her future. A chance to show her daughter that falling down didn't mean staying down. Mary picked up Janice and held her close, breathing in the sweet baby scent of her. "We're going to be okay," she repeated. this time with certainty. And for the first time in a very long time, she believed it. Monday morning arrived with a flurry of nervous energy. Mary stood in front of the bathroom mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The weekend had been a whirlwind, a hastily arranged shopping trip with the signing bonus, childcare paperwork, and mental preparation for what lay ahead. She smoothed down her new navy blazer and straightened her pearl earrings. Simple but elegant, professional without being flashy. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, at least on the outside. Inside, her stomach churned with anxiety. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. "You've earned this chance." In the living room, Janice was already dressed in a pink onesie and tiny cardigan, looking impossibly small in her car seat. Mary had packed the diaper bag with meticulous care. Extra clothes, favorite toys, the teddy bear keychain, detailed feeding instructions. The thought of leaving her daughter with strangers, even qualified ones, sent a pang through her chest. But Mrs. Rodriguez had assured her that the West Ridge Child Care Center had an excellent reputation. "The best in Boston," she'd said. "You're lucky to get a spot there." Lucky, the word echoed in Mary's mind as she gathered her things. Was it luck that had brought Joseph Westridge into that convenience store at precisely the right moment? Or something else? Fate, perhaps, or justice, finally finding its way to her door. The ride to Westridge Industries took 30 minutes. The familiar landmarks of downtown Boston passing by her window as the taxi wove through morning traffic. With each block, memories flooded back. Lunches at the corner bistro, morning coffee runs with colleagues, late nights preparing presentations. She'd loved working here once. The question was whether she could love it again or if too much had changed. Both in the company and in herself, the Westridge building stood imposing against the winter sky, 48 stories of gleaming glass and steel. Mary paid the driver and stepped out, Janice's carrier in one hand, her new leather briefcase in the other. She took a deep breath and walked through the revolving doors into the grand lobby. The security guard looked up as she approached. "Good morning, ma'am. May I help you?" "Mary Mitchell. I'm starting today as a consultant in community outreach." The words felt strange on her tongue, both familiar and foreign. The guard checked his computer and nodded. "Yes, Ms. Mitchell. You've been pre-cleared." He handed her a temporary badge. "The child care center is on the 3rd floor. Someone will meet you there to help get your daughter settled." "Thank you," Mary said, clipping the badge to her blazer. The elevator ride was swift and silent. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, a smiling woman in a bright cardigan was waiting. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm Elena Gomez, director of the West Ridge Family Center. We've been expecting you." She bent down to peer at Janice. "And this must be our newest little member. Hello, sweetheart." Janice gurgled in response, her eyes wide with curiosity. "I filled out all the forms," Mary said, reaching for the paperwork in her bag. "But if there's anything else you need—" "We've received everything," Elena assured her. "Mr. Westridge made sure your daughter's spot was fully processed. Why don't you come in and see the facility? I know it can be nerve-wracking to leave your baby, especially on the first day." The child care center was nothing short of impressive. Bright, spacious rooms filled with educational toys, a dedicated infant area with soft mats and mobiles, and a staff-to-child ratio that put Mary's fears to ease. Elena introduced her to Tara, the primary caregiver who would be responsible for Janice. "She'll be in good hands," Elena promised. "You can call us to check on her anytime, and we'll send updates throughout the day." Mary knelt to unbuckle Janice from her carrier, holding her close for a moment before passing her to Tara. "Her formula is in the bag," she explained, her voice threatening to break. "She usually takes 6 ounces every 3 hours, and she likes to be rocked when she's tired, a gentle sway, not too bouncy. And we've got her, Ms. Mitchell," Tara said kindly. "Go do what you need to do. We'll take good care of your little one." It was harder than Mary had expected, walking away from Janice. Even knowing she was just in the building, the separation felt monumental. This was the first time since her birth that they'd been apart for more than a few hours. Mary tried to focus on the positive. This was for them, for their future, for stability and security. The elevator took her to the 18th floor, home to the Community Outreach Division. The doors opened to reveal a space both familiar and changed, the same open floor plan, but with updated furnishings and technology. A few early arrivals were already at their desks, heads bent over computers or chatting quietly by the coffee station. Rebecca Chen was waiting at the reception desk, tablet in hand. Ms. Mitchell, welcome back to Westridge. I'm Rebecca Chen, Mr. Westridge's chief of staff. Thank you, Mary replied, shaking her hand. It's strange to be back. I can imagine. Rebecca's expression was professional, but warm. I've been instructed to get you settled in today. Your temporary office is this way. As they walked through the department, Mary felt eyes on her. A few faces she recognized. Thomas from accounting, Diane from marketing, Sarah who had once shared her lunch table. Some offered tentative smiles or nods. Others quickly looked away, suddenly fascinated by their screens. Mary kept her chin up, her pace steady. Let them wonder. Let them talk. She was here to work, not to explain herself. Her office was small but private, with a window overlooking the harbor and a desk already equipped with a new laptop and phone. On the wall hung a framed photo of the Boston skyline at sunset. The computer has been set up with your credentials, Rebecca explained, setting her tablet on the desk. You'll find the current Urban Renewal Initiative files in your shared drive, along with historical data going back 3 years. Mary set down her briefcase, running her fingers along the smooth desktop. 3 years would include my original proposal. Yes, Rebecca said carefully, though you should know that most of the documentation lists James Barrett as the primary architect of the initiative. Mary's jaw tightened slightly. I'm aware. Mr. Westridge has arranged for you to have access to all relevant materials, including board presentations and budget allocations. He's also scheduled a department meeting at 10 to introduce you to the current team. Rebecca paused. Including Mr. Barrett. There it was, the moment Mary had been both dreading and anticipating. James would be there, would see her, would know that his carefully constructed facade was in danger. Will Mr. Westridge be at the meeting? Mary asked, trying to keep her voice steady. No, Rebecca replied. He felt it might put unnecessary pressure on the situation. Your direct supervisor will be Elaine Harper, our VP of Community Relations. She's expecting you in her office at 9:30 for a brief orientation before the team meeting. Mary nodded, grateful for Joseph's foresight. His presence would have made the first encounter with James even more charged. This way, she could establish herself with the team before the inevitable confrontation with her ex-husband. After Rebecca left, Mary took a moment to center herself. She opened her briefcase and placed a small framed photo of Janice on the desk, a touchstone, a reminder of why she was here. Then she powered on the computer and began exploring the files. What she found made her blood boil. Her original proposal was indeed there, buried in the archives, but with James Barrett listed as the project lead and her name relegated to research assistant. The comprehensive plan she had developed over 6 months of research and community engagement had been stripped of its most innovative elements and repackaged as a more conventional development project. Gone were the integrated childcare facilities that had been the heart of her vision. Gone was the community ownership model that would have given residents a stake in their neighborhood's growth. What remained was a hollow shell, still branded as urban renewal, but missing the soul of what she had intended. No wonder it was floundering. James had taken the credit without understanding the vision. Mary was so absorbed in the files that she barely noticed the time passing. A gentle knock at her door startled her. Ms. Mitchell, I'm Elaine Harper. The woman in the doorway was in her early 50s, with short silver hair and bright, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. I hope you're finding everything you need. Mary stood quickly. Yes, thank you. I was just reviewing the project files. Elaine's smile was knowing. And how much of your original work is still intact? The question caught Mary off guard. You know that James Barrett didn't create the Urban Renewal Initiative? Let's just say I had my suspicions. Elaine entered the office and closed the door behind her. I joined in Westridge about a year after you left. The project never quite made sense to me. Brilliant in concept, but fragmented in execution. Like someone was working from an incomplete blueprint. Mary felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Having an ally in leadership, someone who already suspected the truth, would make her task considerably easier. Why didn't you say anything? She asked. Elaine shrugged. Corporate politics. James has powerful connections, And without concrete evidence or the original creator coming forward, it was just my intuition against his documentation. She leaned against the edge of the desk. But now you're here and things can finally be set right. The next 20 minutes were spent in productive conversation, with Elaine outlining the current state of the initiative and the challenges they were facing with community buy-in. Mary shared her original vision, explaining how the removed elements had been essential to its success. The project was never meant to be just about buildings, she explained passionately. It was about creating an ecosystem, housing, childcare, education, and employment opportunities all integrated to support families. Take away any piece and the whole structure weakens. Elaine nodded. That makes much more sense. The current implementation feels disjointed because it is disjointed. She glanced at her watch. It's nearly 10. Are you ready to meet the team? Mary took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. The conference room was already full when they arrived. 10 faces turned toward the door. Some curious, some welcoming, one frozen in shock. James Barrett sat at the far end of the table, his expression shifting rapidly from confusion to disbelief to something darker. Mary held his gaze for one electric moment before deliberately looking away. Good morning, everyone, Elaine said briskly. I'd like to introduce our new consultant, Mary Mitchell. Mary will be working with us for the next 3 months to evaluate and improve the Urban Renewal Initiative. Some of you may remember her from her previous time at Westridge. Mary stepped forward. Thank you, Elaine. It's good to be back. Her voice was steady, professional. If her heart was racing, nothing in her demeanor betrayed it. I'm looking forward to helping refine and enhance the initiative. I believe it has tremendous potential that hasn't yet been fully realized. Around the table, people nodded or murmured greetings. All except James, who remained unnaturally still, his knuckles white where he gripped his pen. Elaine continued with the meeting, outlining current projects and introducing team members. Mary took notes, asked thoughtful questions, and established herself as a knowledgeable, engaged professional. All the while, she could feel James watching her, his gaze burning into her profile. Finally, Elaine opened the floor for her questions. After a brief silence, James spoke, his voice controlled but tight. I'm curious about Ms. Mitchell's qualifications for this role. It's been 2 years since she worked at Westridge, and the Urban Renewal Initiative has evolved significantly in that time. Before Mary could respond, Elaine cut in smoothly. Ms. Mitchell comes highly recommended by Mr. Westridge himself, who was impressed with her previous contributions to the company. Her expertise in community integration models is exactly what we need at this stage of the project. James's jaw clenched visibly. I see. Well, as the project lead, I should be consulted on any major changes to the initiative. Of course, Elaine agreed pleasantly. Ms. Mitchell will be working closely with the entire team. In fact, James, why don't you schedule some time with her this week to bring her up to speed on your implementation strategies? It was a masterful move, placing James in the position of having to either cooperate or openly refuse. He had no choice but to nod stiffly. I'll have my assistant arrange something. The meeting concluded shortly after, with team members dispersing to their respective offices. Mary gathered her notes, aware that James was lingering, clearly waiting for the room to clear. Elaine caught her eye with a questioning look and offered to stay if needed. Mary gave a small shake of her head. This confrontation was inevitable. Better to get it over with. When the last person had left, James closed the door with deliberate calm. What the hell are you doing here, Mary? His voice was low, dangerous. Mary met his gaze steadily. Working, same as you. After 2 years of silence, you just happened to show up as a consultant on my project? He took a step closer. Did you think I wouldn't recognize what this is? Some kind of revenge scheme? Your project? Mary's eyebrows rose. Interesting choice of words, considering we both know who actually developed the Urban Renewal Initiative. James paled slightly but rallied quickly. I've spent 2 years implementing and refining that initiative. All the documentation lists me as the creator. The board, the investors, everyone knows it as my work. They know what you told them, Mary corrected, keeping her voice level. But lies have a way of unraveling, James, especially when the original architect returns with proof. His expression hardened. No one will believe you. You abandoned your job without notice. Disappeared without a trace. Why would anyone take your word over mine? Mary gathered her papers calmly. I guess we'll find out. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on my daughter. She moved toward the door, but James stepped into her path. Our daughter, you mean? The one you never told me about? Mary froze. What? Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? James's voice was bitter. The timing, the sudden disappearance. I'm not an idiot, Mary. No, just a liar and a thief, she shot Bing, anger flaring. And for the record, I did tell you. You said, and I quote, I'm not ready for this, and left without a forwarding address. Janice is my daughter. You gave up any right to her the day you walked out. James had the decency to look away briefly. Things were complicated then. They're complicated now, Mary said firmly. But I'm here to do a job, not to rehash our personal history. So either schedule that meeting Elaine suggested, or get out of my way. For a tense moment, they stood locked in silent confrontation. Then James stepped aside, his expression unreadable. This isn't over. No, Mary agreed, walking past him. It's just beginning. Her heart was pounding as she made her way back to her office, but she kept her steps measured, her expression composed. Only when she had closed her door did she allow herself a moment of weakness, sinking into her chair with shaking hands. James knew about Janice. He'd figured it out, though he'd never acknowledged her, never offered support, never even asked if they were okay. And now, what would he do with that knowledge? Use it against her somehow? Suddenly, the stakes felt even higher than before. Mary checked her phone, a message from the child care center with a photo of Janice napping peacefully. The sight steadied her. This was why she was here. For Janice, for their future, for justice. She wouldn't let James intimidate her. Not again. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings and introductions. By lunchtime, Mary had a much clearer picture of the current state of the Urban Renewal Initiative, and it was worse than she'd initially thought. Not only had James stripped away key components, but he'd misallocated resources, focusing on superficial aesthetics rather than structural support systems. The beautiful facades he'd constructed housed little of substance. She was making notes at her desk when a gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Joseph Westridge stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Ms. Mitchell, may I come in? Mary straightened in her chair. Of course, Mr. Westridge. He entered and closed the door, then took the seat across from her desk. How was your first morning? Enlightening, Mary replied honestly, and challenging. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I expected nothing less. I've heard you've already made quite an impression on the team. I've had an encounter with James Barrett, she admitted. It was tense. Joseph nodded. Rebecca informed me. She also mentioned that Elaine Harper has taken you under her wing, which is excellent news. Elaine is one of our most respected executives. She seems to have suspected the truth about the initiative all along. Many people have had doubts, Joseph said. But suspicion isn't proof, and James has powerful allies. He paused. Which brings me to the reason for my visit. The Westridge Foundation Gala is this Friday night. Mary blinked at the sudden change of topic. The charity gala? Yes, it's our biggest event of the year. Board members, executives, major donors, all in one room, including the Montrose family. Joseph's gaze was steady. James will be there with his fiancée, Catherine. I'd like you to attend as well. Mary's stomach tightened. I'm not sure that's a good idea. I've only just started in a confrontation at such a public event. Not a confrontation, Joseph corrected. An introduction. Catherine Montrose should meet the woman whose work her fiancé has claimed as his own, don't you think? Besides, your insights on the Urban Renewal Initiative would be valuable to our donors who support it. Mary hesitated. The thought of attending a formal gala, of navigating the sophisticated social waters of Boston's elite, was daunting. She'd once been comfortable in such settings, but that felt like a lifetime ago. I don't have anything appropriate to wear, she said finally, the admission costing her pride. The company will cover that expense, Joseph replied smoothly. Consider it part of your role as a Westridge representative. Mary studied him, trying to understand his strategy. Why is this important to you? The truth about the initiative could come out through official channels, through documentation and review. Joseph was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. When my sister died, he said finally, it wasn't just the pneumonia that killed her. It was the system that failed her at every turn. She couldn't get time off work to see a doctor because she'd already used her sick days when my niece had the flu. She couldn't afford the medication she needed because her insurance had a high deductible. She was trapped in a cycle of impossible choices, and in the end, those choices killed her. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. The Urban Renewal Initiative, as you originally designed it, could help break that cycle for thousands of families. That's why it matters. That's why the truth matters. Not just for you or for corporate integrity, but for all the people who could benefit from your vision being properly implemented. Mary felt the weight of his words. And you think my attending this gala will help achieve that? I think putting a face to the initiative, the real face, will make it harder for people to dismiss or minimize what's happened, including Catherine Montrose. Joseph stood. But the choice is yours, Ms. Mitchell. I won't force your hand. Mary thought of Janice, of the future she wanted for her daughter, of all the other mothers struggling as she had struggled, who might find relief through the program she had designed, of the truth buried under James's lies for 2 long years. I'll be there, she said firmly. Joseph nodded, the barest hint of approval in his eyes. Rebecca will send you the details and arrange for a car to pick you up. The company stylist will contact you about attire. He moved toward the door, then paused. How's Janice adjusting to the childcare center? The personal question caught Mary by surprise. Well, I think. They sent a photo of her napping earlier. Good. Something softened in his expression. My niece loved that center. She still talks about Ms. Elena in the reading corner. With that, he was gone, leaving Mary to wonder once again about the complex man who had stepped so unexpectedly into her life. A CEO who noticed struggling mothers in convenience stores, who remembered employees' names years after they'd left, who carried a teddy bear keychain in his expensive coat pocket. The afternoon passed in a flurry of activity as Mary dove deeper into the project files, comparing the current implementation with her original plans. By the end of the day, she had compiled a comprehensive list of discrepancies and critical omissions. It was damning evidence of how James had gutted the heart of her vision while preserving just enough of its framework to claim continuity. At 5 o'clock, she packed up her notes and headed to the childcare center. Her steps quickened as she approached, eager to see Janice after their first day apart. The center was quieter now, most children already picked up. Tara greeted her with a warm smile. Ms. Mitchell, Janice had a wonderful first day. She's just waking up from her afternoon nap. Mary followed her to the infant room, where Janice was indeed stirring in a small crib. The moment the baby saw her mother, her face lit up with a toothless grin, arms reaching eagerly. Mary scooped her up, inhaling the familiar scent of her daughter, feeling the perfect weight of her in her arms. I missed you, sweet girl, she whispered, pressing a kiss to Janice's forehead. Did you have a good day with Miss Tara? She was an absolute delight, Tara confirmed, handing Mary the daily report sheet. Ate well, napped on schedule, and was fascinated by the sensory wall. She's quite advanced for her age. Pride swelled in Mary's chest. Thank you for taking such good care of her. As she gathered Janice's things, a familiar voice spoke from the doorway. They're the best in the city? Mary turned to find Joseph standing there, his tie loosened slightly, briefcase in hand. He wasn't looking at her, but at Janice, with an expression of gentle curiosity. So I've heard, Mary replied. Janice seems to have had a good first day. Joseph approached slowly, respectful of the baby's space. Hello, Janice, he said softly. I'm Joseph. I work with your mother. Janice studied him solemnly from the safety of Mary's arms, then reached out one tiny hand toward his tie. Joseph chuckled, a warm sound that Mary realized she hadn't heard before. She has excellent taste, he said. This is hand-painted silk. Very grab-worthy. Mary smiled despite herself. She's at the age where everything goes straight to the mouth, so I wouldn't get too close if you value that tie. Joseph's expression turned thoughtful. Some things are worth the risk. He stepped back nonetheless, giving them space. I was just picking up some documents Elena is sending to my niece at college. She likes to stay connected to the center. Are you headed home? Yes, it's been quite a day. Mary adjusted Janice on her hip. My driver is waiting outside. May I offer you a ride? Mary hesitated. After the intensity of the day, the thought of navigating public transit with Janice and all her gear was daunting. Still, she was wary of accepting too much from Joseph, of creating an imbalance that might later feel like obligation. As if sensing her thoughts, he added, "It's on my way. Dorchester, right?" "Yes, but—" "Then it's settled." His tone was matter-of-fact, not leaving room for argument without making it awkward. "Daniel can drop you first." The ride to Mary's apartment was surprisingly comfortable. Joseph kept the conversation light, asking about Janice's development and sharing amusing anecdotes about his niece's early years. There was none of the strain that might have been expected between a CEO and a consultant, just two people connected by circumstance and perhaps a growing mutual respect. When the car pulled up to her building, Joseph made no move to get out, maintaining the professional boundaries of their relationship. "I'll see you tomorrow, Ms. Mitchell. The stylist will call you in the morning about the gala." "Thank you for the ride," Mary said, gathering Janice and her bags. "And for everything else." He nodded once, his expression warm but reserved. "Good night, Mary. Good night, Janice." As the sleek black car pulled away, Mary stood for a moment on the sidewalk, Janice babbling happily against her shoulder. The day had been a roller coaster of emotions: fear, anger, determination, pride. And now, standing in the crisp evening air with her daughter warm in her arms and a job to return to in the morning, she felt something else. Something that had been missing for so long, she'd almost forgotten its name. Purpose. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Mary threw herself into her evaluation of the Urban Renewal Initiative, conducting interviews with team members, reviewing budgets and timelines, and even visiting one of the partially completed sites. What she found only strengthened her case. James had fundamentally misunderstood or deliberately undermined the interconnected nature of her design, resulting in a project that looked impressive on paper but failed to deliver meaningful change on the ground. James, meanwhile, had been conspicuously absent, canceling their scheduled meeting and communicating only through terse emails. It was a childish avoidance tactic, but Mary was almost grateful for the reprieve. Every interaction with him drained her energy she preferred to direct toward rebuilding her professional reputation and caring for Janice. By Thursday, Mary had compiled enough evidence to present a preliminary report to Elaine, who reviewed it with growing alarm. "This is worse than I thought," she admitted, flipping through the detailed analysis. "He's essentially created a Potemkin village, all facade, no substance. No wonder community engagement has been so low." The original design integrated support systems that would have addressed the actual needs of residents, Mary explained. Without those elements, it's just another development project that looks good in press releases but doesn't change lives. Elaine leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled thoughtfully. "This report is compelling, Mary, and damning. Have you shared it with Joseph yet?" "Not yet. I wanted your input first since you are my direct supervisor." "Wise," Elaine nodded. "I suggest we present it together after the gala. Speaking of which, did you meet with the stylist?" Mary smiled wryly. "Yes, it was an experience." The company stylist, a flamboyant man named Paolo, had spent 2 hours with her the previous day, bringing a selection of designer gowns to her office and fussing over her like she was preparing for the Oscars. The final selection, a deep emerald silk that complemented her coloring perfectly, was being delivered to her apartment that evening. "Paolo takes his job very seriously," Elaine chuckled, "but he knows what he's doing. You'll look magnificent." "I'm nervous," Mary admitted. "It's been a long time since I attended anything so formal. And with James there and Catherine Montrose," Elaine's expression grew serious. "The gala is a strategic opportunity, Mary. Many key players will be there: board members, investors, community partners. It's your chance to remind everyone of who you are and what you bring to this company." She paused. "And yes, to meet Catherine Montrose. From what I've heard, she's a formidable woman, intelligent, principled. If she learns that her fiancé has built his career on stolen work, she'll have some difficult decisions to make." "I don't want to cause a scene," Mary said quickly. "That wouldn't help anyone, least of all me." "No scenes necessary," Elaine assured her. "Just be yourself. Let the truth do the work for you." Mary nodded, grateful for Elaine's guidance. Over the past few days, the older woman had become not just a supervisor, but a mentor, offering advice and support that went beyond professional courtesy. It was another unexpected gift in what was proving to be a season of second chances. That evening, as promised, the gown was delivered to her apartment, along with accessories and detailed instructions from Paolo about hair and makeup. Mary laid it carefully across her bed, running her fingers over the luxurious fabric. When was the last time she had worn something so beautiful? Before Janice, certainly. Before her world had narrowed to survival and sacrifice. Rodriguez had agreed to babysit Janice for the evening, waving away Mary's offers of payment. "You look after my grandson at the company daycare for free," she reminded Mary. "This is what neighbors do." Now, as Mary prepared for the gala, Janice watched from her playmat, occasionally squealing with delight at her mother's transformation. Mary applied her makeup with careful precision, following Paolo's instructions. She twisted her hair into an elegant updo, securing it with the borrowed pearl pins. And finally, she stepped into the emerald gown, the silk cool and smooth against her skin. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Gone was the exhausted, desperate woman counting quarters at a convenience store counter. In her place stood someone poised, elegant, confident, a woman ready to reclaim her rightful place in the world. A text message chimed on her phone. "Car arriving in 5 minutes. JW." Mary gathered her evening bag, double-checked the babysitting instructions for Mrs. Rodriguez, and knelt to kiss Janice goodbye. "Mommy will be home soon, sweet girl. Be good for Mrs. Rodriguez." The black sedan was waiting when she emerged from her building. The same driver, Daniel, holding the door for her with a respectful nod. To her surprise, Joseph was already inside, dressed in an impeccable tuxedo that accentuated his tall, athletic frame. He looked up as she entered, and for a brief moment, his carefully controlled expression faltered, something like admiration flickering in his eyes. "Miss Mitchell," he said, recovering quickly. "You look lovely." "Thank you," Mary replied, settling across from him. "Paolo is apparently a miracle worker." "The dress merely complements what's already there," Joseph said. The comment delivered so matter-of-factly that it didn't sound like flattery. "Are you ready for this evening?" Mary took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Joseph studied her for a moment. "You don't have to do this, you know. We could find another way to address the situation with James." "No," Mary said firmly. "I need to do this, not just for myself, but for Janice. I want her to grow up seeing a mother who stands up for herself, who doesn't allow others to diminish her work or her worth." She met Joseph's gaze directly. "And for your sister, for all the women who never got the chance to reclaim their power." Something shifted in Joseph's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or a deeper understanding. He nodded once, a gesture that conveyed more than words could have. The car wound through the evening traffic, eventually pulling up to the grand entrance of the Westridge Foundation building, a historic structure in the heart of Boston's financial district. Red carpet lined the steps, and elegantly dressed guests streamed inside. A photographer captured arrivals for the society pages. Daniel opened the door, and Joseph stepped out first, then extended his hand to assist Mary. The simple courtesy steadied her nerves. They walked up the steps together, not arm in arm, but close enough that their connection was clear to observers. Inside, the ballroom was transformed into a winter wonderland, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables adorned with white roses and silver candelabras. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters circulated with champagne flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres. "Impressive," Mary murmured, taking in the scene. "The Foundation Gala raises millions for local charities each year," Joseph explained, "many of which would benefit from the properly implemented Urban Renewal Initiative." Mary understood the subtext. This wasn't just about her personal vindication. It was about ensuring that her vision, a vision that could help countless families, was realized as intended. The reminder strengthened her resolve. Joseph led her through the crowd, making strategic introductions to board members, executives, and community leaders. Mary spoke passionately about her background in community development, carefully laying the groundwork for later revelations about her role in the initiative. People listened, impressed by her knowledge and commitment. She was no longer invisible. About an hour into the event, A ripple of attention moved through the room as a striking couple entered. James, handsome in a traditional black tuxedo, and beside him, a tall, elegant woman with honey blonde hair swept into a sophisticated chignon. Catherine Montrose carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. Mary felt Joseph tense slightly beside her ear. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded, eyes fixed on the couple. "Yes, I think it's time I introduce myself to Ms. Montrose." Joseph followed her gaze. "Carefully, Mary. Catherine is not just James's fiancée. Her family controls 30% of Westridge's investment capital." "I understand." Mary straightened her shoulders. "I won't cause a scene, but she deserves to know the truth before she marries him." Joseph nodded, respecting her decision. "I'll be nearby if you need me." Mary made her way across the room, her heart pounding but her steps steady. James spotted her approach, his expression darkening. He whispered something to Catherine, who turned to look at Mary with curious eyes. "Ms. Montrose," Mary said, extending her hand. "I'm Mary Mitchell. I've recently rejoined Westridge as a consultant on the Urban Renewal Initiative." Catherine's grip was firm, her smile polite but assessing. "James mentioned you'd returned. It's lovely to meet you. I've heard the initiative was quite innovative in its original conception." Mary held her gaze steadily. "Yes, it was. In fact, I'd love to tell you more about that original conception sometime. I think you'd find it illuminating." James stepped closer, his smile tight. "Mary is being modest. She was part of the research team in the early stages." "Actually," Mary corrected calmly, "I was the project architect. The entire initiative, from the integrated childcare facilities to the community ownership model, was my design." Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly. "Really? How interesting. James has always spoken of it as his brainchild." "Has he?" Mary's tone was conversational, but her eyes never left Catherine's. "I'd be happy to show you the original documentation sometime. It makes for fascinating reading, especially when compared to the current implementation." James's hand closed around Catherine's arm. "We should greet my parents, darling. They just arrived." But Catherine didn't move. Something in Mary's direct gaze had caught her attention. "I'd like to see that documentation, Ms. Mitchell. Perhaps next week? I take a personal interest in the Foundation's investments." "It would be my pleasure," Mary replied sincerely. She could see the intelligence in Catherine's eyes, the quiet assessment taking place behind her social smile. This was a woman who valued truth and integrity, qualities James had proven he lacked. As James led Catherine away, Mary could see him speaking urgently, likely trying to damage control. But the seed had been planted. Catherine's thoughtful expression as she glanced back suggested she wasn't dismissing Mary's claims. Joseph appeared at her side, offering a glass of water. "How did it go?" "Better than expected," Mary replied, accepting the glass gratefully. "She wants to see the documentation. She'll draw her own conclusions once she does." "Catherine Montrose is not easily fooled," Joseph observed. "She's been groomed since childhood to take over her family's investment firm. If she suspects James has been dishonest, she'll investigate thoroughly." The evening continued with dinner served and speeches given about the Foundation's work. Mary found herself seated at a table with board members and their spouses, fielding questions about her perspective on community development. She spoke with passion and expertise, making an impression without ever directly addressing the situation with James. When the formal program concluded and music beckoned couples to the dance floor, Mary excused herself to step onto the terrace for a moment of quiet. The night air was crisp but not bitter, the city lights spread below like a carpet of stars. She heard the door open behind her and turned, expecting Joseph. Instead, James stood there, his expression hard. "What exactly are you trying to do, Mary?" he demanded without preamble. "Destroy my career? Ruin my engagement?" Mary faced him calmly. "I'm simply reclaiming what's mine, James. The work you took, the recognition you stole. That project would have died without me," he insisted. "You were gone. Someone had to pick it up, move it forward." "Move it forward, yes, claim it as your own. That was theft, plain and simple." Mary's voice was level, controlled. "You could have implemented my vision while acknowledging its source. Instead, you erased me." James's laugh was bitter. Just like you erased me from our daughter's life? The accusation stung, but Mary stood her ground. I tried to reach you when she was born. The number was disconnected. The apartment, empty. You chose to disappear. James, don't rewrite history now. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I've worked too hard to let you destroy everything. Catherine, the executive position, my reputation, it's all finally coming together. I won't let you take that from me. It was never yours to begin with, Mary replied steadily. You built your success on lies, James. That foundation can't hold forever. The terrace door opened again, and Joseph stepped out. His expression was neutral, but his presence was a clear message. Mary was not alone in this fight. Everything all right out here? He asked mildly. James straightened, his public persona sliding back into place like a mask. Just catching up with an old colleague. If you'll excuse me, I should get back to Catherine. When he had gone, Joseph moved to stand beside Mary at the balustrade. Are you okay? Mary nodded, her hands gripping the stone railing. Yes, he's desperate. He knows I have the evidence to expose him. Desperate men can be dangerous, Joseph warned. Be careful, Mary. She turned to look at him, really look at him. In the soft glow of the terrace lights, his face was all planes and angles, strong but not hard. His eyes held concern, but also something else, respect, perhaps, or admiration. Why are you helping me? She asked softly. Really? Joseph was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving out over the city. When I took over as CEO 5 years ago, my first initiative was to establish the company childcare center. The board thought it was a waste of resources. They couldn't see the connection between supporting working parents and building a stronger company. He turned to face her. But you saw it. Your proposal for the Urban Renewal Initiative had that same understanding, that families need integrated support systems, not isolated solutions. When I read your original design, I knew it was exactly what we should be doing in those communities. And then you were gone, and the project lost its soul. He paused. I'm helping you because your vision deserves to be realized, because the truth matters, and because I recognize in you the same determination I saw in my sister, a mother who would do anything for her child, who just needed the world to give her a fair chance. Mary felt something shift between them, a deepening of understanding, a recognition of shared values. Thank you, she said simply, for seeing me, for seeing the truth. Joseph offered his arm. Shall we go back in? I believe this evening has been a success. Mary placed her hand on his arm, drawing strength from his steady presence. Yes, I think it has. As they re-entered the ballroom, Mary caught Catherine Montrose watching them, her expression thoughtful. Across the room, James stood with a group of executives, his smile fixed, but his eyes tracking Mary's every move. The battle lines were drawn. The truth was emerging. And Mary Mitchell, once invisible and voiceless, had found her power again. Later that night, after the driver had taken her home and she had relieved Mrs. Rodriguez, Mary stood in her modest apartment, still wearing the emerald gown. Janice slept peacefully in her crib, unaware of the momentous shifts taking place in her mother's life. Mary looked at her sleeping daughter, then at her own reflection in the window glass. The woman who stared back was transformed, not just by the elegant dress and careful makeup, but by something deeper. A reclaiming of identity, a restoration of purpose, a return to self. We're going to be okay, she whispered, a promise to her daughter and to herself. Better than okay. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, covering the city in a blanket of possibility. Mary watched the flakes dance in the streetlight glow, thinking of Joseph's words on the terrace. The truth matters. It did. And tomorrow she would continue to fight for it, for herself, for Janice, and for all the families who would benefit from her vision finally being realized as intended. For the first time in 2 long years, Mary Mitchell fell asleep not with worry or fear, but with hope. Real, tangible hope for the future that awaited them. The Monday following the gala dawned bright and clear, a crisp winter morning that hinted at the approaching spring. Mary arrived at Westridge Industries early, Janice contentedly settled against her shoulder. The weekend had given her time to reflect on the events of Friday night. Catherine Montrose's interest in seeing the documentation, James's barely veiled threats on the terrace. Joseph's unexpected support. She felt stronger than she had in years, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The child care center was already bustling when Mary arrived. Elena greeted them warmly, taking Janice with practiced ease. She's becoming quite the social butterfly, Elena observed as Janice reached for a colorful toy. Always excited to see her little friends. You'd never know she's only been here a week. Mary smiled, grateful for how quickly her daughter had adapted. She's resilient, gets that from her mother, I suppose. Among other admirable qualities, a familiar voice commented. Mary turned to find Elaine Harper approaching, elegant as always in a tailored pantsuit. Good morning, Elaine. Mary, Elaine nodded, then smiled at Janice. Hello, little one. To Mary, she added, when you're settled, could you join me in my office? There have been some developments over the weekend. The serious undertone in Elaine's voice sent a flicker of apprehension through Mary. Of course, I'll be there in 10 minutes. After saying goodbye to Janice, Mary made her way into Elaine's office, her mind racing with possibilities. Had James made some preemptive move against her? Had Joseph reconsidered his support? Elaine was reviewing documents when Mary entered, but she looked up immediately, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Close the door, please. Mary did so, then took a seat, her back straight, prepared for whatever might come. Catherine Montrose called me yesterday, Elaine began without preamble. She's requested all documentation related to the Urban Renewal Initiative, including original proposals, meeting minutes, and attribution records. Mary's eyes widened slightly. That was fast. Catherine doesn't waste time when her interest is piqued, Elaine agreed, or when her instincts tell her something's amiss. She specifically asked about your role in the project's conception. What did you tell her? The truth that I came on board after you'd left, but that I'd had questions about James's understanding of the initiative's core principles from the beginning. Elaine leaned forward. She's coming in this afternoon. She wants to meet with you privately. Mary took a slow breath. This was both an opportunity and a risk. Catherine's family held significant influence over Westridge. If she sided with James, Mary's position could become untenable. But if she recognized the truth, I'll meet with her, Mary said firmly. I have nothing to hide. Elaine studied her for a moment. Good, because there's more. James has filed a formal complaint with HR, accusing you of professional jealousy and attempting to undermine his position. He's requesting your immediate removal from the project. Mary's jaw tightened. That's ridiculous. Of course it is, Elaine agreed, but it's a tactical move. He's trying to frame the narrative before you can present your evidence. I've already spoken with HR and explained the situation from my perspective. They're withholding judgment until all facts are presented. And Joseph? Does he know about this? He's the one who called me last night to give me a heads up, Elaine revealed. He suspected James might try something like this after the gala. He's scheduled a full board review for next week to address the situation comprehensively. Mary nodded, processing this information. James was escalating, feeling cornered. That made him both predictable and dangerous. What should I do in the meantime, she asked. Continue your work, Elaine advised. Document everything, prepare your presentation for the board, and meet with Catherine this afternoon with complete honesty. She values integrity above all else. It's the Montrose family's defining principle. As Mary left Elaine's office, her phone buzzed with a text message from Joseph. My office, 11:30. Need to discuss recent developments. Mary sent a quick affirmative reply, then returned to her own office to prepare for the meeting with Catherine. She gathered her original design documents, notes from her early research phase, and the comparative analysis she'd been developing between her vision and James's implementation. The evidence was overwhelming, not just of her authorship, but of how fundamentally James had misunderstood or deliberately undermined the initiative's core principles. At precisely 11:30, Mary knocked on Joseph's office door. His assistant, a poised young woman named Amelia, ushered her in immediately. Joseph was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the Boston skyline. He turned when she entered, his expression serious but calm. Mary, he greeted her, thank you for coming. Please, sit down. She took the offered chair, setting her portfolio of evidence on the coffee table between them. Joseph remained standing, his energy too restless for stillness. I assume Elaine has briefed you on James's complaint and Catherine's request to meet, he began. Yes, Mary confirmed. I'm prepared for both. Joseph nodded, then hesitated. There's something else you should know. Something I learned this morning. James has been making inquiries about Janice. Mary's blood ran cold. What kind of inquiries? He's consulted a family law attorney, specifically regarding paternal rights. Joseph's voice was gentle but direct. I have a contact in the firm he approached. They alerted me out of professional courtesy. Mary's hands clenched in her lap. The thought of James attempting to claim any rights to Janice, the daughter he'd abandoned before birth, filled her with dread and fury. He can't possibly, he has no relationship with her. He's never even seen her. He didn't want her. I know, Joseph said softly, finally taking a seat across from her. And any judge would take that abandonment in seriously. But Mary, you need to be prepared. James is clearly willing to use every available weapon, including Janice. She met his gaze, fear warring with determination in her eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're facing, he replied simply. And because I want you to understand that Westridge Industries will support you fully, not just professionally, but personally if necessary. We have an excellent legal team that would be at your disposal should James pursue this route. Mary was momentarily speechless. Corporate legal support for a personal family matter went far beyond professional courtesy. It was a level of commitment she hadn't expected. Thank you, she managed finally. That means more than I can say. Joseph leaned forward, his expression earnest. I meant what I said at the gala, Mary. The truth matters. And so does justice, not just for your work, but for you and Janice as a family. James doesn't get to abandon his responsibilities for 2 years and then suddenly claim parental rights when it's convenient for leverage. Mary studied him, this complex man who kept surprising her with his depths of conviction. You take these things personally, she observed. A shadow crossed his face. When my sister died, my niece's father suddenly reappeared after years of absence. Wanted custody, not because he cared for her, but because my sister had a substantial life insurance policy that would go to her daughter's guardian. His jaw tightened at the memory. I fought him in court for 18 months. Eventually won, but the damage to Emily, having to testify, being torn between loyalties, it took years to heal. I'm sorry, Mary said softly, for both of you. Joseph's expression softened. Emily is thriving now, senior at Cornell, studying environmental engineering. But I've never forgotten what that fight cost her. I wouldn't wish it on any child. He paused. Or any mother. The moment hung between them, weighted with shared understanding and an unspoken connection that deepened with each revelation. Then Joseph straightened, professional demeanor sliding back into place. Now let's prepare for your meeting with Catherine. She's a formidable ally if convinced, but she doesn't suffer fools or half-truths. For the next 45 minutes, they reviewed Mary's evidence and refined her presentation strategy. Joseph offered insights into Catherine's personality and values, helping Mary frame her case in terms that would resonate with the investor's commitment to ethical business practices. His guidance was practical, specific, and clearly rooted in years of working closely with the Montrose family. By the time Mary left his office, she felt centered and prepared. The threat of James's potential custody claims still loomed, but she refused to let it derail her focus. One battle at a time. At precisely 3 o'clock, Amelia escorted Catherine Montrose to Mary's office. In daylight, away from the glamour of the gala, Catherine was even more impressive. Tall and slender in an impeccably tailored cream suit, her honey blonde hair swept into a sleek ponytail. Her handshake was firm, her blue eyes direct and assessing. Thank you for meeting with me, Ms. Mitchell, Catherine said, taking the offered seat across from Mary's desk. I appreciate your willingness to discuss this matter directly. Of course, Mary replied, and please call me Mary. Catherine nodded. Mary, then, I'll be equally direct. Your comments at the gala raised serious concerns about the provenance of the Urban Renewal Initiative, a project my family has invested in significantly, based largely on assurances from James regarding its innovation and potential social impact. I understand, Mary said, and I wouldn't have raised those concerns without substantial evidence to support them. She opened her portfolio, extracting the original project proposal with her name clearly listed as lead architect. This is the initiative as I designed it 2 years ago, before I left Westridge. Catherine accepted the document, studying it carefully. This differs significantly from the current implementation. Yes, Mary agreed. The original design was comprehensive, integrating housing, childcare, education, and employment opportunities in a mutually supportive ecosystem. The current version retains the housing component, but has eliminated or severely reduced the support systems that would make those housing developments truly transformative for families. For the next 30 minutes, Mary walked Catherine through her evidence methodically. The original research, the community feedback that had shaped her approach, the stark contrast between her vision and James's execution. Catherine listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed her sharp intelligence and thorough understanding of community investment principles. Finally, Catherine set down the last document and met Mary's gaze directly. Why did you leave Westridge so abruptly, without ensuring your project was properly attributed? It was the question Mary had been dreading, the one that forced her to reveal personal vulnerability in a professional context. But Joseph had advised complete transparency, and instinctively, Mary knew he was right. I was pregnant, she said simply. My husband, James Barrett, left me when I was 6 months along, said he wasn't ready for fatherhood. I tried to continue working, but without support, facing single motherhood, dealing with the emotional aftermath of abandonment. She took a breath. I made the decision to step away. It wasn't planned. It wasn't strategic. It was survival. Catherine's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something, surprise perhaps, or recognition crossing her features. James is your child's father? Mary nodded. Yes, though he's had no contact or involvement with Janice since before she was born. Until very recently, I don't believe he even knew her name. A heavy silence filled the room as Catherine processed this information. Then she straightened, decision made. Mary, I appreciate your candor and the thoroughness of your evidence. Her tone was formal but not cold. I'll need time to consider all of this, of course, and to have certain conversations. But I want you to know that the Montrose family takes ethical business practices very seriously. If what you've presented is accurate, and I have no reason to doubt that it is, there will be consequences. I understand, Mary said quietly. I'm not seeking retribution, Catherine, just recognition of my work and the opportunity to see it implemented as designed. Catherine studied her for a moment longer, then stood. A reasonable request. I'll be in touch, Mary, soon. After Catherine left, Mary sat at her desk, emotions swirling. She had done all she could, presented the truth, made her case. Now it was in Catherine's hands. Her phone buzzed with a text from the childcare center. A photo of Janice, beaming toothlessly at the camera, clutching the teddy bear keychain Joseph had given her. The simple image centered Mary immediately, reminding her of what truly mattered. Whatever professional battles lay ahead, whatever James might attempt, Janice was worth every fight. Mary worked late that evening, refining her presentation for the upcoming board review. The office had emptied gradually, until only the occasional security guard passed her door on routine rounds. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't notice the figure standing in her doorway until he spoke. You never did know when to quit, did you? Mary's head snapped up. James stood there, his tie loosened, his expression hard. There was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, a desperate edge that sent warning signals through her system. I'm working, James, she said evenly. We can talk tomorrow if you have concerns. He stepped into her office, uninvited. Catherine canceled our dinner plans tonight, said she needed time to think. To think, Mary, 3 weeks before our wedding. Mary remained outwardly calm, though her pulse quickened. That's between you and Catherine. Don't play innocent, he snapped. You poisoned her against me. Told her what? That I'm some kind of fraud? That I stole your precious project? I told her the truth, Mary replied, rising slowly from her chair. I showed her the evidence. Her conclusions are her own. James moved closer, anger radiating from him. You had no right. You walked away from this company, from me, from everything. You don't get to come back now and destroy what I've built. What you've built on my work, Mary corrected, maintaining the desk between them. On my ideas, on my design. That's the problem, James. It was never yours to claim. His laugh was bitter. And what about Janice? Is she mine to claim? Because maybe I should. Maybe it's time I stepped up, demanded my parental rights, shared custody at minimum. How would you like that, Mary? The threat hit its mark, fear spiking through her, but Mary refused to show it. Janice is not a pawn in your professional game, James, and any judge would see through such a transparent ploy. Would they? He challenged. A successful executive father, newly aware of his child, seeking to be part of her life, versus a single mother who deliberately kept that child from him? I think my chances are pretty good. Mary's hands clenched at her sides. You abandoned us. You left a note saying you weren't ready. You changed your number, moved out. There's a paper trail, James. Evidence of your choice to walk away. Circumstances change, he said coldly. People change. I'm in a position now to provide for a child, a position that you're threatening with these accusations. The conversation was spiraling into dangerous territory. Mary reached for her phone. I think this discussion is over. You should leave. James's hand shot out, covering hers before she could pick up the device. We're not finished. I believe you are. Joseph's voice, calm but commanding, came from the doorway. He stood there, briefcase in hand, expression controlled, but eyes blazing. This is a private conversation, James said, not releasing Mary's hand. Not anymore, Joseph replied, stepping into the office. Remove your hand, James. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then slowly James withdrew, straightening his tie in a gesture of forced composure. We were just discussing our daughter, he said with artificial pleasantness. A family matter. Were you? Joseph's tone made it clear he'd overheard enough to know better. Because it sounded like you were threatening Ms. Mitchell with a custody battle as leverage in a professional dispute. That would be highly inappropriate, perhaps even actionable. James's facade cracked slightly. You're taking her side? After everything I've done for this company? I'm upholding Westridge's values of integrity and ethical conduct, Joseph corrected. Values that seem to have escaped you recently. James looked from Joseph to Mary, calculation visible in his expression. This isn't over. Either of you. He turned and stalked out, footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. When he was gone, Mary released a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Are you all right? Joseph asked, concern evident in his voice. She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. Yes, thank you for intervening. I don't think he would have, but he was definitely escalating. Joseph set his briefcase down and took the seat Catherine had occupied earlier. I was on my way out and saw the lights still on in your office. Then I heard raised voices. He paused. He's desperate. The board review, Catherine's obvious doubts. He's watching everything slip away. Which makes him dangerous, Mary said quietly. Yes, Joseph agreed, but not unmanageable. His threat about custody will contact legal first thing tomorrow, get ahead of any potential filing. And I'll have security keep an eye on him while he's in the building. Mary sat back down, suddenly exhausted. I never wanted this kind of conflict. I just wanted recognition for my work, the chance to see it properly implemented. I know, Joseph said gently, but sometimes justice requires confrontation. It's unavoidable. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling between them. Then Joseph spoke again, his tone deliberately lighter. How about I drive you home? It's late, and after that encounter, I'd feel better knowing you got there safely. Mary hesitated only briefly before accepting. That would be appreciated. I just need to pick up Janice from the late care room. The drive to Mary's apartment was quiet, Janice sleeping peacefully in her car seat. Joseph had insisted on coming up to ensure they got in safely, a protective gesture that Mary found both touching and reassuring after James's threats. At her door, Mary turned to thank him. You've gone above and beyond, Joseph, for a consultant you barely know. His expression softened in the dim hallway light. I think we've moved past barely know at this point, Mary. The simple statement acknowledged the connection that had been growing between them, not just professional respect, but something deeper, something built on shared values and mutual understanding. Yes, she agreed softly. I suppose we have. They stood there for a moment longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between them. Then Joseph stepped back, professional boundaries reasserting themselves. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." Mary nodded. "Good night, Joseph. And thank you for everything." After he'd gone, Mary settled Janice in her crib and prepared for bed, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. Joseph was right. James was cornered and desperate. The next few days would require vigilance and strength. But for the first time in this conflict, Mary felt truly supported. Not just by Joseph, but by Elaine, by the evidence of her own work, and increasingly, it seemed, by Catherine Montrose. The truth was emerging, piece by piece, and with it, a path forward that Mary had not dared to imagine even 2 weeks ago. The next 3 days unfolded in a blur of preparation and strategy. Mary worked closely with Westridge's legal team, documenting James's threats and securing their commitment to defend against any custody filing. She refined her presentation for the board, incorporating feedback from Elaine and additional evidence from company archives. And she met twice more with Catherine Montrose, whose initial shock had transformed into focused determination to understand the full scope of James's deception. James himself was conspicuously absent, having taken sudden personal leave according to the official HR notification. The timing wasn't lost on anyone, coming just after Catherine had postponed their wedding planning meetings and requested time to reassess their relationship. By Friday morning, the stage was set for the special board review. Mary arrived early, dressed in a confident red suit that Elaine had helped her select. Board members respond to visual cues of authority, she had advised. Own the room from the moment you enter. Joseph was waiting outside the boardroom, reviewing last-minute notes with Rebecca. He looked up when Mary approached, his expression revealing a flash of admiration before settling back into professional composure. "Ready?" he asked simply. Mary nodded. "As I'll ever be." Inside, the boardroom was imposing, a long mahogany table surrounded by 15 leather chairs, currently occupied by Westridge's most powerful decision-makers. Mary recognized several faces from the gala. Elaine was already seated, as was Catherine Montrose, representing her family's interests. A conspicuously empty chair marked where James should have been. "He was invited to present his perspective," Joseph explained quietly. "His absence speaks volumes." The meeting began with Joseph outlining the purpose of the review, to examine concerns regarding attribution and implementation of the Urban Renewal Initiative. He then introduced Mary, turning the floor over to her without additional commentary, a vote of confidence in her ability to present her case. For the next 40 minutes, Mary laid out her evidence methodically and persuasively. She showed her original designs alongside James's altered versions. She presented testimony from former team members who corroborated her leadership role. She demonstrated how the initiative's current struggles stemmed directly from the removal of key integrative elements that had been central to her vision. Throughout her presentation, Mary maintained a tone of professional objectivity. This wasn't about personal grievance, she emphasized, but about restoring the initiative to its full potential for community impact. She concluded not with accusations against James, but with a comprehensive plan for rehabilitating the project, bringing it back in line with the original vision while acknowledging the work already completed. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the questions began, probing and direct. Mary answered each one with confidence and clarity, never evading or exaggerating. The board members were tough but fair, clearly processing the implications of what they were hearing. Finally, Catherine Montrose spoke up. "I've reviewed Ms. Mitchell's evidence thoroughly over the past few days. I've also attempted to discuss these matters with James, who has been evasive, to say the least." She looked around the table, her expression resolute. The Montrose family invested in this initiative because of its innovative approach to community development. We believed we were supporting something transformative. Instead, it appears we funded a hollow imitation, stripped of its most meaningful components. Her words carried significant weight. The other board members exchanged glances, the tide of opinion visibly shifting. The board chair, a distinguished woman in her 60s named Harriet Winters, turned to Joseph. "What is your recommendation, Mr. Westridge?" Joseph stood, his presence commanding the room. "Based on the evidence presented, I recommend 3 actions. First, immediate reinstatement of Ms. Mitchell as project director for the Urban Renewal Initiative, with full authority to implement her original design. Second, a formal correction of all company records to reflect accurate attribution. And third, a thorough review of Mr. Barrett's conduct to determine appropriate consequences. Harriet nodded thoughtfully. And the financial implications of these changes? Initial analysis suggests a 15% increase in project costs to restore the integrated elements, Joseph replied. However, projected community impact metrics would increase by an estimated 60%, and long-term sustainability indicators would improve dramatically. The value proposition remains strong. Catherine spoke again. The Montrose Foundation would consider additional funding to support the restoration of the original design elements, particularly the child care and education components. This unexpected offer sent a ripple of interest through the room. Catherine's endorsement, backed by potential additional investment, carried tremendous influence. After further discussion, the board called for a vote. The result was unanimous in favor of Joseph's recommendations. Mary Mitchell would be reinstated as project director with a 2-year contract and full attribution for her original work. James Barrett would be placed on administrative leave pending a conduct review. As the meeting concluded, board members approached Mary individually, offering congratulations and expressing interest in her revitalized vision for the initiative. Catherine Montrose was among the last to speak with her. "I've ended my engagement to James," she said quietly, her composure remarkable given the personal revelation. When confronted with the evidence, he became defensive, then manipulative. "Not the qualities I seek in a life partner." Mary was momentarily lost for words. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "That couldn't have been an easy decision." Catherine's smile was small but genuine. On the contrary, once the truth was clear, the decision made itself. She extended her hand. "I look forward to working with you on the initiative, Mary. I believe your vision is exactly what these communities need." After the boardroom emptied, Mary remained seated, processing the whirlwind of events. Her life had transformed completely in just 2 weeks, from counting quarters for baby formula to directing a multi-million-dollar community development project. It seemed almost unreal. Joseph returned, having seen the board members out. He took the seat beside her, his expression warm with something that looked very much like pride. "Congratulations, Project Director Mitchell," he said softly. Mary shook her head, still amazed. "I keep thinking I'll wake up." "Very real, I assure you," Joseph replied, "and well-deserved." Mary turned to face him fully. "None of this would have happened without you, Joseph. Without your belief in me, your support, your willingness to challenge the status quo. I simply created space for the truth to emerge," he demurred. "You did the hard work, both 2 years ago in creating the initiative and these past 2 weeks in fighting for it." Their eyes held for a long moment, the connection between them deepening with each shared victory, each overcome obstacle. There was something there, something neither had yet named, but both increasingly acknowledged. "What happens now?" Mary asked, not just referring to the project. Joseph seemed to understand the dual nature of her question. "Professionally, you'll assemble your team, revise the implementation plans, begin the work of bringing your full vision to life. The board has given you their complete confidence." He paused, then continued more personally. "As for the rest, I think that's a conversation best had outside these walls. Don't you?" Mary smiled, appreciating his respect for professional boundaries. "Yes, I think it is." They rose together, walking side by side from the boardroom. A new chapter beginning. The following Monday, Mary arrived at Westridge with Janice as usual, but everything felt different. Her temporary office had been replaced with a spacious corner suite, befitting her new position as project director. The nameplate on the door read Mary Mitchell in elegant silver lettering, a small detail, but one that symbolized her official reintegration into the company. Elena met her at the childcare center with exciting news. "We've been selected as the model for the community centers in your initiative. I'll be consulting on the design and training protocols." Mary beamed, delighted by this perfect synergy. "I couldn't think of anyone better, Elena. Your approach to integrated childcare is exactly what these communities need." Throughout the day, Mary met with her newly assembled team, many of whom had worked with her during her previous tenure at Westridge. There was an energy of renewal and purpose that had been missing from the project for too long. Ideas flowed freely, Innovations building upon her original framework, community partnerships being reignited with fresh enthusiasm. By late afternoon, Mary was reviewing updated architectural plans when Joseph appeared at her door. He knocked lightly despite it being open, a gesture of respect for her new domain. "How does it feel?" he asked, entering at her invitation. Mary looked around at the evidence of productive work scattered across her desk, at the wall where she'd pinned up community feedback and design inspirations. "Like coming home," she admitted, "but better somehow, clearer, more purposeful." Joseph nodded, understanding. "The best second chances are the ones where we bring wisdom from the journey." "Speaking of journeys," Mary said, setting aside her work, "Janice and I were wondering if you might join us for dinner tomorrow night. Something simple at our apartment. A thank you for everything you have done." Joseph's expression softened. "I'd like that very much." Later that evening, as Mary prepared dinner in her small kitchen, with Janice happily playing in her high chair, she felt a contentment that went beyond professional success. Her life had expanded again, not just with opportunity and security, but with connections. With Elaine's mentorship, Elena's friendship, Joseph's. Whatever was growing between them, still undefined but increasingly precious. The next day brought news that James had resigned from Westridge rather than face the conduct review. According to Rebecca, who had sources everywhere, he had accepted a position with a smaller firm in Chicago, a significant step down, but a clean break. He had also notably made no move toward any custody claim for Janice. Mary suspected Catherine's influence in that decision, another quiet mercy from a woman who had every reason to be bitter, but chose integrity instead. When Joseph arrived for dinner, he brought not flowers or wine, but something far more meaningful: a framed copy of Mary's original Urban Renewal Initiative proposal, complete with her name prominently displayed as lead architect. It would hang in the project's community center once completed, he explained, a permanent acknowledgement of her vision. The evening unfolded with surprising ease, conversation flowing naturally between professional plans and personal stories. Joseph was different here, away from the office, more relaxed, more open. He sat on the floor with Janice, building block towers for her to gleefully destroy, his deep laugh mingling with her baby giggles. He listened intently as Mary shared her hopes for the initiative's impact, offering insights without imposing. And when Janice finally fell asleep, they sat together on Mary's small balcony, watching the city lights shimmer against the night sky. "I've been thinking," Joseph said, after a comfortable silence, "about what you asked in the boardroom. What happens now?" Mary turned to him, the soft glow from the apartment illuminating his thoughtful expression. And I think, this happens now," he gestured between them, "this connection, this possibility, if you're open to exploring it." Mary considered his words. 2 weeks ago, the idea of a relationship would have seemed impossible. She had been too focused on survival, too wounded by past betrayal, too consumed with caring for Janice. But now, with firm ground beneath her feet again, with professional purpose restored, with security for her daughter established, now there was space for something more. "I am," she said simply, "up at it to it, I mean, but carefully, thoughtfully." She smiled softly. "I have Janice to consider." "Of course," Joseph agreed immediately. "No rushing, just possibility." They sat together a while longer, talking about everything and nothing: favorite books, childhood memories, dreams for the future. The easy comfort between them spoke of a foundation already built through shared values and mutual respect. Whatever grew from here would be rooted in something real and solid. As the evening drew to a close, Joseph helped Mary clear the dinner dishes, their movements falling into a natural rhythm. At the door, he hesitated, then reached for her hand, his touch gentle but certain. "Thank you for tonight," he said softly, "for sharing your home, your daughter, your time." Mary looked up at him, this man who had changed everything by a simple act of kindness in a convenience store. "Thank you for seeing me," she replied, "not just at Westridge, but that first night, for really seeing me when I felt invisible." Joseph's expression grew tender. Slowly giving her time to step back if she wished, he leaned down and placed a gentle kiss on her cheek. "You could never be invisible, Mary Mitchell. You shine too brightly for that." After he'd gone, Mary stood by the window watching his car pull away. Her fingers traced the spot where his lips had touched her skin, a simple gesture that held the promise of more to come. Not a rescue or a fairy tale, but something truer, a connection between equals, built on recognition and respect. 6 months later, on a perfect summer day, Mary stood on a construction site, hard hat firmly in place as she explained the innovative features of the first completed building in the Urban Renewal Initiative to a group of community leaders. Beside her, Elaine nodded approvingly as Mary detailed how the integrated childcare center on the ground floor would operate in tandem with the adult education facilities and job training resources. The ecosystem approach means families receive support at multiple levels simultaneously, Mary explained passionately. Parents can pursue education or job training while their children receive quality care just downstairs. Community elders serve as mentors and receive purpose and connection in return. It's a holistic model of empowerment rather than isolated assistance. The community leaders were visibly impressed, asking thoughtful questions and expressing enthusiasm for the partnership opportunities. After the tour concluded, Elaine pulled Mary aside. "The board is thrilled with the progress," she said warmly, "and the Montrose Foundation has committed additional funding for the next phase. You've exceeded everyone's expectations, Mary." Mary smiled, gratitude warming her chest. It's been a team effort, and having actual resources to implement the full vision makes all the difference. They walked together toward the site office, passing construction workers and project managers, all part of bringing Mary's vision to physical reality. What had once been just ideas on paper was now taking shape in concrete and steel, in community partnerships and sustainable systems. "How are things with Joseph?" Elaine asked, her tone casual but her eyes knowing. Mary's smile softened. "Good, really good actually. We're taking it slowly, being mindful of our professional relationship and of Janice, but..." She paused, searching for the right words. "It feels right, like we understand each other on a fundamental level." Joseph had been true to his word about moving carefully. Over the past months, their relationship had developed gradually. Weekend outings with Janice to the aquarium or park, quiet dinners after she was asleep, long conversations about their hopes and fears. He had become a steadfast presence in their lives, reliable but never imposing, supportive but never controlling. Just last weekend, they had taken Janice to the beach for the first time, watching her delighted reaction to the waves and sand. There, with the sun setting over the ocean and Janice building lopsided sandcastles between them, Joseph had told Mary he was falling in love with her. Not a grand declaration, just a simple truth offered without expectation. And Mary had realized with quiet certainty that she was falling too. "He's good with Janice," she added, the ultimate endorsement from a protective mother. Elaine smiled knowingly. "I've noticed the way he looks at both of you. Well, it reminds me of how my late husband used to look at me and our daughter, like you're the center of his world." Mary felt a blush warm her cheeks. "We're not quite there yet." "But you're on the Watapoimo," Elaine observed, "and it's about time. You both deserve happiness." Later that evening, Mary and Joseph sat on a blanket in the Boston Common, watching Janice toddle unsteadily on the grass, each new step an adventure. At 13 months, she was curious about everything, her personality emerging more clearly each day. Determined but joyful, serious about her discoveries but quick to laugh. "She reminds me of you," Joseph remarked, his shoulder warm against Mary's. "That same focus, the way she furrows her brow when she's figuring something out." Mary leaned into him slightly. "I see more of my mother in her, honestly. That fearlessness. Mom was the same way, always the first to try something new, to take a chance, Obado." "A family trait then," Joseph said, "considering everything you have accomplished this year." Mary thought about the journey from that desperate night in the convenience store to now, with the Urban Renewal Initiative thriving under her direction, Janice healthy and happy, and this growing relationship with a man who saw her completely and valued what he saw. "I never thought I'd be here," she admitted quietly. "That night when I was counting quarters, I couldn't see past the next day, the next meal for Janice. Everything else was just survival." Joseph took her hand, his touch now familiar and comforting. "And now?" Mary watched as Janice discovered a dandelion, her tiny fingers reaching for the white fluff with wonder. Now I can see a future again. For both of us. For all of us, maybe. Joseph's fingers tightened around hers, a silent acknowledgement of her words. They sat together in comfortable quiet, watching Janice explore her world with growing confidence. No grand declarations, no elaborate promises, just the simple truth of three lives gradually intertwining, finding strength and joy in their connection. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the common, Joseph helped Mary pack up their picnic, while Janice fought valiantly against sleepiness. He lifted the drowsy baby with practiced ease, cradling her against his shoulder where she immediately nestled, trusting and content. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's go home." And in that simple phrase, "let's go home," Mary heard the future taking shape. Not a rescue story, not a fairy tale ending, but something far more valuable. A family formed not from obligation or convenience, but from recognition, from seeing each other, truly seeing, and choosing to stay. They walked together across the common, Janice sleeping peacefully against Joseph's shoulder, Mary's hand tucked securely in his. Behind them, the city skyline gleamed in the fading light, including the West Ridge building where it had all begun. Ahead lay the path they were creating together, step by careful step. This wasn't an ending, Mary realized. It was a beginning, richer and more meaningful than she could have imagined on that desperate night with counting quarters. A beginning built on truth, on justice, on second chances earned rather than given. A beginning that reminded her, with each step forward, that sometimes the quietest acts of kindness could change everything. That sometimes being truly seen was the greatest gift of all. And as they walked home together, Mary Mitchell finally felt complete, not because she had been rescued, but because she had been recognized for exactly who she was. And in that recognition had found not just professional redemption, but personal wholeness, the future stretching bright and full of possibility before her.